Hello there, you're watching WilhelMiniatures. Right now I'm running a Kickstarter campaign featuring these 3 monster miniatures. Follow the link down below to check them out. You might be wondering, what am I going to do with these 3 generic looking fantasy monsters when I'm collecting Nurgles? Well, in this episode I'm going to show you why exactly you need these miniatures, even though you collect something specific. First, we need a rider, and I'm going to use one of these fly-riding plague bearers because they already have their legs spread a little bit, and yeah, they're more in a riding pose. I will have to alter it, but I think it's a good start, and an easier start than the regular plague bearers. Not surprising, it doesn't fit very well. And that's of course because the Toad has a very broad and flat back, while this one's supposed to sit on top of something round. But I think it's very hard to sit on top of a Toad when you are this little compared to it. So the best way to do it, I think, would be to sit on your knees on top of it. So I'm going to try to bend the knees on this one. As the Games Workshop plastic is a little bit flexible, I might be able to just bend the knee in the position I want without breaking the leg. This is a pretty good start, but I definitely need to bend the hips back. So what I think I can do is just cut the leg at the joint and then position it how I want it. I used some blue tack to try out a few different poses, and in the end this one worked out the best. It was also possible to have it on its knees, but I think this looks a little bit more dynamic and natural. I like the pose, and in the end I think these 2 pieces, or these 2 miniatures, merged quite nicely, but there's something missing back here, and I was thinking about maybe giving it a backpack or some gear or something to bring, but that wouldn't be very Nurgly. And then I found this piece, a fly butt from one of the fly riders, and it fits very nicely. I have no idea what it's supposed to be, but if I merge it into both the Toad and the rider, it might be, I don't know, some fleshy growth, or maybe this is where they store all of their gear, weapons and food and stuff. I was looking for something to cover this hole, and I found this nice looking gravestone in my bits box. It's not directly Nurgly, but the Nurgle theme is sometimes, zombie-ish, so a gravestone wouldn't be that far out. I'm looking through some assorted Nurgle bits and leftovers from the Dark Mechanicum project, and I found this one, which is from one of the Forge World Greater Demons. And here I actually found 2 components that I want to use. The head that's hanging down under there has quite sharp details, of course, because it's a Forge World piece. And it's a quite nice skull-like face. And I like this slimy bits on top. It looks a bit like a funky hat. And then we have the rest of the piece, which actually fits quite nice here. I need to fill the entire section around here, so I'm just going to look for pieces like this and add them where they fit the shape of the curve. A witch needs a staff, and the one I could find was this one, where I removed the blade. This one is from the Wormspat kit, and it's got a very big mutated hand, which I quite like. So it's bigger than the other hand, which I got from the Goblin kit, but I think it's going to look nice. I snipped off the bottom part of the staff, and I want to place it on top to make it like a wood all the way through, instead of having the top as a spear, because I wanted to have some magical items hanging from it instead of being an actual weapon. I'm going to use some green stuff on this one to fill out all of these openings and spaces. But before I do that, I think I want to fill them with some other details first, so that I can have something to build the green stuff around. And I'm going to use some different sizes of plastic and glass and metal pearls or beads, just to place them around and make it easier to do the green stuffing, and also replicate some of these nasty Nurgly lumps like you can see here. This is another material I want to use, some electrical wire, and I think this one's going to be quite nice to make some Nurgly details. As it's super flexible, I can fold it and roll it, and make some nasty kind of hanging structures like this, which might replicate some entrails if I manage to make them a little bit lumpy with some glue or maybe some green stuff. It's time to fill some gaps and add some additional details using green stuff, or epoxy putty, and here I'm using a mix of green stuff and milliput to do this, which is why it appears a little bit lighter than regular green stuff. I like this mix because it still retains the properties of green stuff, except it dries a little bit harder, and it's also a little bit less sticky than green stuff. But it's still sticky enough to stick to any surface. When merging two different pieces like this, it's nice to replicate both of the textures. So the lowest one here is very flat, so I'm just going to roll my tool over it and kind of smooth the green stuff into this part. While on top here we have a lot of like wounds and holes and such. So I'm going to try to replicate that by pushing my tool into it and having some holes in the transition. So it looks like it's a fluid transition between the two different fleshy parts. This is the second pass of green stuff, and now I'm mainly focusing on the rider. I did a lot of cutting on it to make it fit the toad, or like changing the pose, so I have a lot of gaps. So yeah, that's quite straightforward actually. I'm just going to put down some clay in between all the pieces. And since this is a Nurgle figure, I'm also going to poke some holes here and there, which is going to be some nice fleshy skin texture. I mixed a little bit too much green stuff, but that's fine in this case because I want to mount my miniature on a gaming base to match the rest of my army or the rest of my collection. And the miniatures that they will get in the Kickstarter are cast with a textured base, so they're ready to paint straight from the box. But it's also very possible to glue them on a gaming base and then add some additional texture around it to hide the seam. The green stuff is still fresh, but that's no problem, it's still going to dry under this layer of texture. The texture I'm using here is a mix of Mod Podge and garden dirt. I'm using the same texture around the gravestones to blend them a little bit better in with the miniature. I want it to look like this toad or this creature have risen from the ground. I'm also applying some grass tufts to my miniature. I'm just putting these down on top of the texture, which is still wet, which means that there is enough Mod Podge to keep them in place. I see now that I didn't center the miniature completely onto the base, so it's more room on this side. And the way to fix this is just to add some extra detail on the side. That will make it look intentional and a little bit more balanced. So I'm just pushing down one of these nice gravestone plank things from the zombie kit. I'm just pushing it straight into the Mod Podge texture, and I think that's going to be enough to keep it in place. And I can also hide the seam with a couple of more of these tufts. I always like to add the grass tufts and static grass on my miniature before painting, because I think it looks a lot better when I paint it together with the miniature than if I leave them like this, especially this one. It really looks like plastic, so I'm not too fond of it. But after painting, it's absolutely fine. Alright, that's it for this episode. Now go follow the link in the description to find my Kickstarter and back it to get the toad like this yourself.